In this section, we will consider what makes an effective presentation. We will begin by looking at 5 classic presentation mistakes and what you can do about them, identified by academic blogger The Thesis Whisperer. The full article is linked in this section under additional resources. Number 1. Too much information. This tends to happen when presenters think they can say more than they can in the allotted time, and when researchers try to tell the audience everything in their research areas, veering off course to explain, often in painful detail, definitions, arguments, and counter-arguments. Although it's tempting to try and fit as much as you can into your presentation, you need to make it clear and digestible for your audience. It's hard for your audience to hold vast amounts of information in their heads, and it can leave the audience struggling to follow your presentation and wondering when you will get to the point. To avoid making this mistake, recognise that you only have about 1,800 to 2,400 words to get your point across in 20 minutes. Focus on the most important points. For example, unless methods is what you want to talk about, gloss over it in favour of findings. You can use metaphors and/or analogies to shortcut explanations of theory and method, and you can make handouts with extra information and your contact details for your audience to take away. Number 2, all literature and no action. Your audience wants to hear more about your work than the work of others, which, if it is a specialist conference, they have probably already read or are at least aware of. Whilst you want to demonstrate you know the research area, this is not your literature review. You should focus on telling your audience what literature is most important and why. You can also bundle the literature up into sensible groupings and use just one author to represent an idea or argument. Number 3, why are we here again? This happens when you fail to communicate to your audience why your research is important. Data and interpretations are offered, but there's no sense of what might come next, what use the research could be put to, or how it changes anything in the bigger world beyond the thesis or paper. You need to go beyond your data and interpretation. What comes next? Why does your research matter? Make it clear to your audience why they should listen to you. Don't avoid making claims in fear of criticism, but make sure you can back up what you are saying, and use hedges such as perhaps, might, could, and possibly. Be clear about your call to action. What do you want your audience to be able to think or do differently after listening to you? Number 4, undigested text. This happens when a person reads straight from their paper, usually without looking at the audience. As tempting as this may be, it is very unengaging and difficult to follow. It's also good to practice talking about your research free-form or from notes. You'll have to do this in your Viva or if you're giving a lecture on your research, or anything else for that matter. To overcome this, try rewriting your whole presentation in spoken English. If you must quote from your paper, confine it to short amounts and display it on a slide so people can read along. Number 5, question time. Answering questions at the end of your presentation can be daunting, but try not to panic. Prepare for questions as well as for your presentation. Write down answers or notes on questions you think people might ask. And remember, this is a conversation, not a performance. You can try controlling the question time by posing some of your own questions at the end of your presentation. Recognise that some questions are an excuse for someone to offer their opinion, and you can turn the question around on the speaker with a phrase like, "I'm not sure, what do you think?" You can write the question down as someone is asking you and reflect it back to the asker. You can also ask the speaker to make the question concrete with an example. Sometimes a conference is running behind schedule and panelists are under pressure to reduce the length of their talks. Be aware that running out of time happens and sometimes it's not your fault. To be best prepared for this outcome, know the key points of your presentation and be prepared to skip over particular bits if needs be to make a key point at the end and leave your audience with something to think about. There's always time to expand in the question and answer section. Thank you for watching. You can find the slides and a transcript linked below this video. When you're ready, continue to the next section to consider some other common presentation mistakes.